Good evening and welcome to the very first episode of the Southern Heathens Podcast. My name is Raven Tierson. With me is my co-host Ubba Humirson, and together we are the Southern Heathens. A little bit about myself. I am a Mississippi native at the moment. I was born in Michigan. I've been here for 20 plus years, and I've been a pagan most of my life. My mother was a practicing witch, she practiced witchcraft, and I was raised mostly Celtic in that respect. Recently I have left the Celtic path behind, and I'm becoming more of a Germanic or Norse pagan. And to me, that it's more fulfilling. I feel more comfortable in that path, and it's all around a better feeling. Tell them a little bit about yourself.
Hello, guys. My name is Ubba Humirson, as he just said. I am a Washington native, Washington State, that is, not D.C. I just recently moved to Mississippi, and I'm happy to be here. I have been a Norse pagan now, or / heathen, whatever you want to call it. I have been a heathen now for about 4, give or take, years. I was an atheist growing up. Mom was Catholic. Dad was kind of an atheist. But recently, in the last 4 years, I became a pagan. My mom did too. I just never looked back ever since that happened. And I'm just glad to be on this podcast. And yeah, I've been doing nothing but reading, exploring, honoring and worshiping the gods, the giants. I'll take it back to you.
And it's pretty interesting because as a pagan, I have more experience as a pagan possibly than you do. However, you have more experience as a Norse heathen or a Germanic pagan than I do. So I'm learning a lot from you as opposed to the other way around, if that makes sense. So yeah, I mean, Mississippi is a great place to actually reconnect with the gods. Do you agree?
I do. And coming from Washington State, which is, for lack of a better term, they claim to be super open, when in reality it's actually kind of not. I didn't feel at home. I felt the gods there, and that's how I discovered, that I was a pagan. But ever since I've been here in Mississippi, it's been not just more quiet, but it's been more quiet in terms of people. But in the presence of the gods, no, I've definitely felt them a lot more here. And also, by the way, you live in northern Mississippi, not southern, so it ain't flatlands. It's definitely more hills and definitely mountains. And we also live out in the woods, so it's been pretty good so far. And I'm excited for this new journey ahead. I never thought in a million years I'd say, hey, I'm moving to the South. I'm from Washington State. People have their opinions of the South, but for me, I love it down here so far, and I haven't looked back. So.
Yeah, definitely. A lot of people have a lot of negative connotations about the South. It's the Bible Belt. If you're a pagan, it's not going. It's not going to go well for you. But as it goes, altogether, it's a pretty positive experience. You don't get as many people, telling you how to live your life. It's a live and let live kind of deal. You stay in your lane, I'll stay in mine. They might look at you a little weird at first. Especially we're covered in tattoos. We're wearing these pendants and necklaces, and we definitely don't look the southern part. But overall, they don't. They seem more accepting here than what people would try to convince you otherwise.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Ever since I've been here, yeah, I've gotten a few looks, and I don't actually blame them, because I know people have their judgments on tattoos. That's just kind of a thing, and that's fine. I don't care. I have hand tattoos, and I don't just mean hands. Like, my fingers are covered in tattoos. So I understand. People are gonna stare. My left forearm is a sleeve and whatnot. My stomach's covered, my back, my ribs, whatever. Doesn't bother me, but I've not gotten any grief. I've heard, a little Bible talk here and there, but it hasn't been, them trying to convert me or anything like that. It's actually been pretty positive. They, you know, they've been pretty accepting and they're pretty respectful. That's the biggest thing I've noticed between here and Washington is there is so much more respect here for the common man here.
Yeah.
You go to restaurants, you go to grocery stores, people hold the door open for you. You know, it's just a respect thing, and it's just being a good person. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who you are, where you come from, where your beliefs are, and I absolutely love it. And I couldn't agree more. Like it's more of an accepting place than people will actually realize until they actually be down here. I understand people have some negative experiences, and obviously, I'm not going to deny that, and that's understandable. Everyone else does. But I'm here to tell you, too, I've also had a lot of negative experiences up in the north. Who, you know, like I said before, the people who claim to be open when they're actually not. So I guess it all just depends on the experience. But so far, it's been pretty good, and I couldn't ask for anything more.
Yeah, man, you're completely right. As far as heathenry as a spiritual practice, it's different for everybody. I've seen people, you know, that follow an actual dogma, which is fine, and I've seen people that do not. But as far as heathenry as a religion, as a Norse pagan or a Germanic pagan, what does that mean to you?
To me, it's not just a practice in terms of like, you know, rituals and ceremonies and holidays. It's also, for me, I think the spiritual side of it as well is the everyday life. You know, what you do in your life every single day, what matters, and what you decide to do with that matters. I've seen many heathens or so-called heathens that go around and just party and, you know, they wear Mjolnir and whatnot, which is fine. You don't have to earn a Mjolnir. You can just wear it. You can do whatever the hell you want. But I've seen a lot of people wear that, claim they're Norse pagan, and all they ever do is go out and party and do absolutely nothing, you know, to better themselves. And you know what? That's not my life, and I'm not here to judge, but I definitely think when it comes to venerating or trying to have your ancestors be proud of you, especially their ancestors who had to endure a lot more than we ever have to in our lifetimes, I think that's kind of a disappointment to them, in a sense. I don't mean that in a bad way, but at the same time, you know, my ancestors, I know full well, had to endure a lot. And so I'm just trying my best to do, you know, to make them proud, as well as the gods and the giants as well, every single day. And to me, that I think it's a lifestyle. It's not just a spiritual or religious practice. It's a lifestyle. And I think people should, or pagans and heathens in general, should keep to that, because, you know, we should only be looking up from here, you know. Right. And this is it is a revival. It's definitely not the same as it was over 1,000 years ago, you know, or even in the Baltics, which was in the 1400s when they got converted. It's not the same as it was back then. But trying to be as tough and strong-minded as our ancestors going about daily life, I completely agree with that. I definitely think people should.
And ancestor veneration is very important within the pagan community and heathenry. Most of all, I've seen that heathens, Norse pagans, Germanic pagans, their connection with their ancestors is one of the most important things. Even sometimes I would say probably above the gods. And for me, you know, this journey has really opened my eyes to my ancestral roots. You know, finding out, you know, where I've come from, all the way from Norway to Normandy to England, Scotland, and of course to the United States, and you know, just tracing that back and realizing where my ancestors came from, what they've been through to get here. You know, there's a lot of power and a lot of love in that. You know, and they're definitely behind us, you know, rooting us on, you know, and it's definitely, you know, we definitely do not have life as bad as they did. And when, you know, the most inconvenient thing about us is recording a podcast at 11 o'clock at night when we're usually in bed by now, you know, which is why I said good evening. So, you know, it's, you know, we we definitely have cushy lives, and I think living is a lifestyle. Being hard workers and being true and honest and upfront and is definitely a huge part of the spiritual journey as a Norse pagan.
And I agree completely. For me personally, the most recent ancestry and the one I connect with the most is my great-great-grandparents from Ukraine and their parents before them, who are from Ukraine, Russia, and even Belarus. They had to endure some hard shit. And, I can't imagine what they had to go through just living there during, their time. And honestly, I only want to make them proud, if they could, if they're watching me right now, I really hope I'm making them proud by doing the best that I possibly can. And like you were saying before, the most inconvenience that we have, we usually would be in bed by now because, we both work fucking long schedules, early in the morning, late at night kind of thing. We'd obviously be in bed by now, where back then, at least the ones that I know, they fled Ukraine during World War I.
Right.
Because of Stalin. Or, sorry, was it World War I or World War II? But anyways, they had to flee here, to the United States and try to make a life for themselves, and they obviously have because, I obviously, my parents, my dad's side specifically, where they came from, they grew up not privileged. They definitely weren't. They didn't have a lot of money, but they made something of themselves. And I wouldn't be here if it wasn't where what they did before. And I'm proud and I'm glad that they did what they had to do, right. To be quite honest. So, yeah, that's where a lot of my ancestral veneration comes from is, Ukraine. Mostly a lot of my pendants that I wear are from there specifically. And I can feel the power, within them. And it only drives me to do better. So, I definitely agree. It's definitely an everyday thing. I don't think it's a, post on social media about how you wear your Mjolnir and you went to the gym for like an hour and, you honored Thor. Like, hey, that's not a bad thing. That's always a good thing, to keep in shape and do what you got to do. But, it's not like a once a year thing. Like, no, if I'm going to do something for the gods or my ancestors, it's going to be every day. Right. As much as I possibly can. I understand everyone's life is different. That's understandable. But, the biggest thing I found that made it easier to try and do more things for my ancestors and the gods was not making excuses for absolutely anything. If something's out of my control, okay, so be it. Then there's no point in complaining or doing anything about it. Just adapt to the situation and just keep moving forward as best you can, even if it's little by little every single day. That means you are changing as a person, even if it's a minuscule amount. Right. And that is, for us today, it's a lot easier for us to do that today. I just don't think a lot of people realize that.
It is a lot easier. And, I think our journeys, it really does help shape the way we behave and our personalities, because if, going in and, like the gods, my patron god is Tyr, the god of war, but also the god of justice and honor and oaths, and a lot of my personality is centered around justice and honor, and keeping your word, and I think my journey that my personality led me toward this particular path. And being closer to that particular god. Not that I don't honor other gods, because the very first god that I ever felt the closest to was Cernunnos in the Celtic pantheon. And he physically came to me in a time where I needed it the most, and I will always honor him and respect him for that. But my path isn't always going, to lead down that way, and I think that's fine, So, do you have, do you want to tell the listeners about your particular patrons?
Yeah. So I could also say this too, because it's not just a patron thing, but also like how I became a pagan, and why. But the first god I ever met was Thor, and this was, long story short, this was after a very not a great time in my family's life. We had just lost a family dog, and it was pretty hard because we'd had him since he was a puppy. My grandparents, it was a gift to them from my aunt and uncle. But anyways, we just lost him to cancer, and one night, essentially, some things happened, and as an atheist growing up, I never believed in anything that did not, that was conceived within, outside of science. I did not believe anything outside of science, but this was definitely outside of that realm, and I never looked back. And Thor came to me that night with a huge, huge strike of lightning and a roar of thunder in the background, and it was magnificent, and I never looked back. He is still, like you said, with Serenos. I wouldn't say he's my patron now for the path that I'm on right now, but he's definitely one that I will always honor, and the one that brought me into paganism, for sure. And it was it was powerful enough to, it's changed my life. Most of the stuff I've done to my body, like tattoo wise, obviously that's the only thing I've done, is mostly Norse, and a couple of them are dedicated to Thor. As always, he will always and forever be my first patron and whatnot. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and there are several different types of gods and basically deities that in the Norse or Germanic religions that you can follow. Giants or Jotun, and Vanir and Aesir, different types of gods and stuff like that. So, I mean, there's a plethora of different beings that you can be drawn to, and that that you can work with, that speak to you at a particular time, to where your path is always changing and flowing and stopping and turning around even sometimes. But they say a rolling stone never gathers moss. So I think as heathens, it's important that we continue to move down our path, and it leads us to different gods and goddesses, and I think that's fine. I think they're okay with that. And I don't believe that our gods are metaphors or hyperbolic stories, stuff like that. I believe them to be actual beings, physical divine beings that are here amongst us. So I think it's important to establish that, as a Norse pagan, this isn't some sort of atheist, this is a metaphor and we're just going to live our lives, like the ancestors did. We're actually dedicated to the gods and to this way of life.
No, I agree. And I think it's funny you say that because, a lot of some, I don't know who, and I'm not discrediting atheists. Like I said, I used to be one, and I have no problem with any atheist or Christian or, Muslim or Jewish person, Hindu, even though Hindu technically would be pagan. But I have no problem with any of those. However, in the stories that we read, from the Poetica to the Prose Edda, from Saxo Grammaticus, from any stories you ever read about, for example, sacrifice, when a tribe or even just a farmer sacrificed a cow, which especially back then was considered to have, you were considered to have wealth if you had a lot of cattle. To sacrifice one of them, even just one, even if you had 50 or 20, whatever it is, or even if you had less, if you had 10 and you sacrificed one, that was a lot of wealth that you were willing to just sacrifice to a living God, not some metaphor. It was, this God is real,
right?
To me, and people can interpret it however way they want, but I think both of us, believe that they actually believed in real divine beings,
right,
being real, and that to me also speaks because for a while it was becoming a pagan at first. I will admit it was hard to believe, even after meeting Thor for that first time, it was hard to believe. That there could be something else besides, as what, especially in America, a lot of people were raised Christian or Catholic or Presbyterian, Lutheran, whatever it is, whatever denomination that you're, a part of, Mormonism, whatever it is. But it was hard. It's hard to believe that sometimes that there is more than one God. There are many that people probably won't even hear of, in our own lifetime.
Right.
But it brings me back to my point, though, that reading those stories and you see them and you see the words and it's kind of hard to believe at first that these, our ancestors themselves literally killed and sacrificed their own animals from which they very much needed as a life force to these gods for something that they needed or wanted. To me, that definitely spoke more to anything, to the fact that these were real gods and not just metaphors. I don't think Greeks, sacrificed goats or whatever they did sacrifice for Zeus. I definitely don't think that was just a metaphor.
Right.
Yeah.
You definitely, you're not going to take something that precious to you, which, it's a taboo subject a lot nowadays about sacrifices and stuff. But the reason why it was a sacrifice is because it meant something to you, it was important to you, and it was a loss. It was a great loss. And that's why it was a sacrifice. You're definitely not going to do that to something that's a metaphor. You're right. So, as we, bring back basically these religions and stuff that our ancestors were a part of, we see that what they went through, and we look at the stories in the Eddas and all the other writings and stuff, and I think, in my own opinion, to turn around and call, what they so seriously believed in a metaphor is kind of insulting to our ancestors. And as a pagan, our ancestor veneration, that is, to me, a big no-no. So, it's a spirituality, it's a religion, first and foremost, as well as a lifestyle.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, man. For example, too, and I don't know if some people will like this, but like you and I have brought up a couple times talking to each other, and that is if someone, and many of you probably, especially heathens or pagans now that grew up in a church lifestyle, and I've been to church too. I grew up an atheist, but I've still gone to church, so I know what it's like, and I've read the Bible too. But one thing that stuck out to me too as I became a pagan was the whole the wine and the bread representing the blood and body of Christ.
Yeah.
Yes, now they don't actually sacrifice animals like they did in the Old Testament, but they're using something as a metaphor, yes, but they are doing it to what they believe is a real God to them.
Yeah.
So how is that any, how is that any different? It is different, but like, how is that any less different from our ancestors before the Christianization of Europe and so on and so forth, of them sacrificing an animal or even humans, to real gods? Like how that's not, to me, that's not really much different. It's just essentially just adapting to the times, I guess, is the best way to put it.
Well, yeah, if you pay attention to biblical stories, especially before the birth of Jesus Christ, animal sacrifice and sometimes human sacrifice was a part of their religion because it was to atone for original sin. And when Jesus was born, and all the way up until his crucifixion, which was the ultimate sacrifice, the sacrifice of all sacrifices, to end sacrifices. That's what the whole point of his crucifixion was for. So, apparently the Christian God sent his only begotten Son to earth as a sacrifice for the people of earth to, basically defeat their sin. It was the ultimate absolute sacrifice. So they are definitely using the blood, the wine, the bread, the flesh as a symbol of that sacrifice, and they're consuming it. So it's a symbolic gesture used in their religion for sacrifice. And so, the taboo around sacrifices is kind of mind-boggling to me, especially because, one of the most mainstream religions technically still does it. They're just metaphorically. It's the same thing. We all know, those of us that practice any kind of sorcery or magic, intent is everything. you know, and that is definitely a ritual with an intent to symbolize a sacrifice, and that intent is a sacrifice. You know, that is the image of your God, and you're sacrificing him, and you're consuming his blood and flesh. The taboo is definitely strange, and I'm not saying I want to go out and sacrifice humans, but I think sacrifice to me is definitely an important part of our faith, and not something that should just be disregarded.
Mm-hmm. No, I couldn't agree more on that either. I mean, if you think about it, not in a religious aspect per se, but I guess you could say spiritually, because spiritual would be more internal as opposed to external, which would be religious. Sacrifice can come in many ways. Let's say, you know, everyone over 18, or even some below 18, I know a lot of people who you work 8 hours a day. You are sacrificing time in your life, the energy of your life force, to make money. And that is just a simple fact. That is what you have to, I mean, that's what our society has come to, but it doesn't necessarily negate the fact that you are literally sacrificing 8 hours or plus. I know some people who work, 10, 12 hours a day, they're sacrificing that time, energy of their life to make financial gain.
Right.
No matter how much of a gain that is what they are doing. You could work at McDonald's, or you could work at Boeing on 747s and, replacing airport parts, or you can be flipping burgers. Regardless, you're still sacrificing that part, your energy, your life force, doing that just to make money. So regardless of how people look at it, sacrifice is definitely an essential to most, if not almost every human on the planet.
Right.
So now as pagans, for us, religiously, I think it's important, especially, to show the gods that we're willing to do that in order to achieve this. Especially if you look back into the sagas, and I won't give any specific examples right now because it is late and I can't really think of a lot. But regardless, though, a lot of the old stories, they did sacrifice a lot, and it meant a lot to them to do that. And so, for that, with that being said, I think people should look into that more and just see, look into their daily lives and what they have to do, especially, as we claim that it is a lifestyle, because I truly believe it, and I know you do too. We all should be looking at it as that.
Right.
That
you brought up, that's very interesting. I actually never thought about, using, that as a sacrifice for personal gain, like working and monetary gain and stuff like that. So that's a very interesting point. But we are coming up on the 30-minute mark, and I think that's a pretty decent introductory episode. You have anything else you want to say?
No, I mean, not really. Other than other than have a good night, you fellow heathens. I hope all life is well, and I hope we're all worshiping the old gods, and we're bringing them. Not to say that we weren't bringing them back to life. Because we believe that they were always alive, but just to say that the worship is definitely back in the works, and that we're definitely working on that to bring it back.
It's definitely important to honor the gods. And I really hope everyone listening enjoyed the content of the episode, and it's just the introductory episode, so we're going to be working a lot more on better content. And if you did like the content, give us a follow, a like, subscribe. We're going to be available on all the podcast apps and platforms. And if you have anything you want to say to us, you can email us for now at the Southern Heathens, that's all one word, at gmail.com. That's the Southern Heathens at gmail.com. And we hope to see you next time. Have a good night.